meeting to order. Everybody's here. Hey, oh, thank you. Well, we'll get started today, folks, and we'll start with General Manager Ken with the land acknowledgement, please.
The St. Clair Region Conservation Authority acknowledges that the watershed is part of the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, the Lenape, and the Chinootan nations, who have a sacred responsibility to preserve the land and water of southwestern Ontario. The SCRCA acknowledges that the treaties that allow us to work alongside the First Nations communities of Kettle and Stony Point, and Amjuan and Vijaywanam, to ensure that we share the responsibility of preserving the land.
Thank you, Ken.
Just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded, and this will not serve as the official record of the board meeting, but the board meeting's official record will be the minutes as posted on the website.
And I'll ask Ashley to do a roll call, please.
John Brennan.
Present.
John.
Present.
Al Broad. Pat Brown.
Present.
Terry Burrow. Terry. We have Terry online with us. No. Sue Cates. Present. Anne Marie Gillis. Oh, I'm sorry, she sent her regrets. Greg Grimes.
Here.
Aaron Hall.
Present.
Emery Hushka.
Present.
Rhonda Jubinville. Present. Frank Kennis has sent his regrets. Adam Kilner.
Present.
Thank you. Brad Lusley.
Present.
Betty Ann McKinnon. Present. John McCabe.
Here.
John McCallum.
Present.
Mary Lynn McCallum. Present. Steve Miller.
Present.
Kristen Rodriguez.
Present.
Lori Scott. Present. And Jerry Westgate.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I'll go to the podium. Will be easier to address. Testing. Good. I should have moved or pleased that the agenda for the annual general meeting be adopted. Moved by Greg Grimes, seconded by Emery Hushka. Okay. The next item, it's requested that the director declare a conflict of interest at the appropriate time on any item with this agenda, and that the director may have a pecuniary interest. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our 2024 annual general meeting. My name is Pat Brown, and I am the chair of the board of directors for the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority. I want to thank you for attending today as we highlight the many accomplishments our organization has achieved over the past year. The SCRCA experienced many successes in 2023, which are documented in our 2023 annual report. If you haven't already, this report can be accessed by scanning the QR code at the registration desk. It is also available online on our website. Today, I would like to take through a few of our achievements this past year to students alike. With almost 22,000 students engaged throughout the year, schools unable to visit our education center in Petrolia due to busing costs and availability. In collaboration with St. Clair Township and the City of Sarnia, shoreline protection work continued along lake also help prepare our shoreline communities for more intense wind and wave action expected as a result of climate change. Our regulations team supports savings on over 200 planning the release of the 10,000th turtle hatchling by our biology team since 2016, when the hatch and release turtle program. This program aims to help hand to our local turtle species by collecting and vegetation, development, and human activities. Our biologists also monitored local waterways for fish and freshwater gaps related to the species at risk, distributions, and populations, which is implementing rehabilitation and protection measures. Through our healthy watersheds and tree planting programs, we continued to provide both technical and financial support to local landowners interested in implementing projects on their properties. Over 70,000 trees were planted and 41 stewardship projects were implemented throughout the watershed. In support of our commitment to continuously improve visitor experience and accessibility at our conservation areas, the SCRCA was able to secure several grants to upgrade trails and other amenities to allow everyone to enjoy and connect with the outdoors. And lastly, we continue to meet legislative requirements prescribed under new regulations issued through Conservation Ontario Authorities Act. In closing, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our board of directors and staff for your hard work and dedication to the authority. I would also like to acknowledge our partners, some of whom are you will realize our vision of a healthy and sustainable natural environment. So, on our meeting, I would like to share with Marilyn Ledoux, member of Parliament. On behalf of the federal government, I want to wish you a productive annual general meeting. The challenges facing our area in terms of shoreline erosion, population growth, and the affordable housing issues will require collaboration to resolve these complex issues. I look forward to being your support as we move forward. Best regards, MP Marilyn Ledoux. So, I would like to introduce some of our guests who are joining us today. The candidates for MPP for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex. Steve Peasnall, would you stand, please? Not here.
You got held up.
You got held up?
It's a dumb issue.
All right. How about Kathleen Shaler from the NDP? Hi, Kathleen. Thank you for coming. And also, we have Warden Kevin Marriott from the County of Lambton. Would you like to bring greetings? It's up to you, sir.
Thank you, Pat. Thanks for the invitation today. And I just want to give you my thanks for all you do, what the Conservation Authority does. Ken has been amazing at being out in the community, and I know 23 was a really wet year, and we got used to Russia's comments on the radio about the watershed being so high, and we really appreciate that. You know, whether it's the tree planting program, the woodlot management, everything is just so important to the County of Lambton. And congratulations to the board for another successful year, and keep up the good work.
Also, we have maybe a brief welcome by the mayor of Don Euphemia, Al Rupp.
Thanks, Pat. On behalf of
Don Euphemia and staff, I'd like to welcome you here to Don Euphemia Community Center. Thank you, directors, for having the AGM here. Thank you to all of our guests and staff for setting everything up. Feel free to walk around during the break. I've opened up the library. We have a great partnership here with Lambton County on the library. You'll see a state-of-the-art art library there. And again, thank you very much for having the annual general meeting.
Okay, also we have partners. Our programs and services benefit greatly from the support of our partners, whether that support is funding one of our programs or working in collaboration on a common goal. I am happy to report that we have representatives from several of our partners and collaborators with us today, including Kettle and Stony Point Hillside School. Are they present? At the back there, welcome. Lambton County and council members and staff from several of our member municipalities are here today. The St. Clair Region Conservation Foundation members are here. The University of Windsor, she'll be speaking here shortly, and Rural Lambton Stewardship Network and the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, and representative from Plains Midstream. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Okay, the business portion of our meeting, I think we did the roll call, and the agenda was moved and seconded. I need a mover, please, for the minutes of the Board of Directors meeting held on December 7th, be approved as distributed. Steve Miller, and seconded by Brad Loosely. Any opposed? I'll take that as carried. 6.2, that the minutes of the Executive Committee meeting held on February 8th of 2024 be approved and as distributed. Mover, Terry Burwell, seconded by Betty Ann Callan. Any opposed? I'll take that as being carried. A mover, please, that the Board of Directors received for information a verbal report on the Conservation Ontario meeting. Ken, do you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. There's outlined some things in my general manager's report, so I'm not going to repeat myself. If you have any questions about anything that's in there. With regard specifically to Conservation Ontario, the only updates I would give is that on Friday, being a Friday long weekend, the province released the new combined regulation, I guess you could say, for section or flood hazard work and planning regulations. So we're still going through that. The one major portion of it is the power of the minister to override rulings of boards and staff with regards to rejection of permits. So people can appeal directly to them, but we're still figuring that out a little more. And they also released a new protocols with regard to environmental assessments for major infrastructure projects. So they're very much shortening up timelines and reducing input for that as well. But we are, Conservation Ontario is working together to put more information on that. So that's fresh off the press. So we will get some more information to you.
Okay, thank you. A mover, please, for Ken's report. Brad Loosely, and seconded by Lori Scott. Any opposed? Seeing none, I'll take that as being carried. Okay, that the St. Clair Region Conservation is 8.1, accepts the recommendation of the Executive Committee and report from the authority's auditors, MNP Chartered Professional Accountants, LLP, and further approves the 2023 audited financial statements that you've all received. Mover, please, Terry Burrow, seconded by Steve Miller. Any questions? Go ahead, Henry.
Just again, to state for the record, as farmer rep, I can't vote on financial issues, so all these folks here wondering why I don't put my hand up, there you go.
Thank you, Henry. Kristen, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick comment, thank you. On the reserves, the high fund reserve in particular. I just wanted to make note that there's still, some I's and dotted and T's crossed on the paperwork. So, before any considerations are given to that reserve, probably we should just.
I believe we brought that up at our, previous meeting, that reserve would be, moved back.
Yeah, so I was just making that comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll take that motion as being passed. Okay, now comes the fun part. That one of the real pleasures of our annual meeting is the opportunity to recognize members of the community who have made a contribution to conservation in our region. I would like to call on Lori Scott, our vice chair, to present awards.
Thank you, Pat. Each year, the Conservation Authority presents conservation awards to deserving individuals and groups. This year, we have 2 deserving award recipients, Kettle and Stony Point First Nation Hillside School and the Center Ipperwash Community Association. Kettle and Stony Point First Nation Hillside School is our first award, and will be presented to them. For the past 4 school years, Hillside School has partnered with the St. Clair's Conservation Education Team to provide students on outdoor, land-based, and learning opportunities. Hillside School offers a land-based education program to ensure students understand their roles, responsibilities, and relationship towards the natural world. The success of this program is dependent on all the staff at the school, the Ojibwe teachers, classroom support staff, and administration. Working together with the St. Clair Conservation, each classroom visits a nearby forest for bushwalks once every 3 weeks. During each bushwalk, the students experience holistic lessons on various subjects. Lessons contain a blend of Western science, Ojibwa language, and traditional knowledge. Students at Hillside School, the next generation, benefit immensely from this on-the-land learning. Exceptional educators like the staff at Hillside School contribute to an increase in knowledge and connection to the natural world. The authority is grateful for the knowledge and education we also received from the teachers and students at Hillside School community. I would like to invite Nicole and Jill to come up and accept the award on behalf of Hillside School. And you can bring as many as you want up. It's up to you. It's so exciting. Melissa? Yeah. Have everyone begin. Nicole, I understand you want to have a few words. You want to say something? I can see. Okay. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. It's an honor.
So on behalf of Hillside School, we would like to say a big, huge chimigwech to Melissa and your organization for allowing the land-based ed to carry through. It's a beautiful program because we do the land-based ed with the water and the land, but we also incorporate the Ojibwe language, so that is very, very essential to meaningful education. So, chimigwech.
The second award goes to the Center Ipperwash Community Association, which I've had a lot of work with in the past 3 years. Members of the Center Ipperwash Community Association embody their visions for projects, which states, by coming together to share, work, and play, the quality of life within our community can be improved. Many members, including a former Conservation Award, Sandra Marshall, who is here today, head out to the Ipperwash Beach almost daily to walk the shoreline. She's got her wagon, she collects phragmites, she collects garbage. She's pretty awesome. While out on their walks, members are geared up with gloves, buckets, and pickers to collect garbage they come across to ensure that the beach remains both aesthetically and environmentally clean. St. Clair Conservation partners with the association to host the annual Ipperwash Beach Cleanup, which happens the Saturday after Labor Day. Many members participate year after year, and because of their daily garbage pickup, our September cleanup event is always much easier than expected, considering the busy summer crowds that visit the beach every summer. We want to thank Center Ipperwash Community Association for their commitment to the community and longstanding commitment to ensure Ipperwash Beach remains an inviting and clear shoreline. We are fortunate to have several members of the association with us. I'd like to invite Sandra, Maureen, Michelle, Grace, and Anita to come up and accept their award. And Sandra after would like to say a few words. Thank you.
I would like to introduce again, if you don't mind, the Center for Wash Community Association members that we have with us today. We have Michelle Berry, our past president, and we have Maureen Harvey, who's on our executive, and she's in charge of membership and communication. Grace Decker is an executive member. She and her husband manage the Ipperwash Beach Club, and they open their doors before business hours for our Wednesday grab and gathers so that we can do the gathering portion in a lovely setting. And Anita Turner, and she's a double duty volunteer, and I'll explain that in just a second. We would really like to thank Lori Scott for nominating us for the Conservation Award and to the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority for their support. Our relationship with you goes way back to 2014 with Steve and Jessica and later on Emily and Donna. And without your support, we wouldn't be where we are today. As Lori said, Ipperwash is a wonderful community. We've had over 23 volunteers that meet weekly from May to October, plus our daily walkers. And we pick up litter from the parking lots, the beach, and the roadways. And believe it or not, People have seen us do it, and now more and more visitors and walkers are coming with their own garbage bags on the days we're not out there, and they're helping as well. Some of the volunteers, like Anita, volunteer regularly to help remove invasive Phragmites, sweet white clover, and spotted knapweed, and that's now allowing the native plants and grasses to thrive. Our municipality of Lambton Shores road crew have been on top of things with their timely collection and disposal of all plant biomass and garbage we collected. We continue to lobby with the municipality of Lambton Shores to provide year-round garbage cans at the top of our access roads, because we are a 12-month operation. And so that is something we are still working on. SCRCA certainly supports the St. Clair Reefs with all of their help over the years, and in our to keep our community environment healthy and inviting. Thank you so very much.
Congratulations to all our, and it is amazing to have everybody doing what they do. Thank you again.
Thank you, Lori, and congratulations to the award winners. I'd like to get a mover, please, that the Board of Directors congratulates the 2024 Conservation Award winners and thanks for their contributions to conservation. I have a mover, Kristen Rodriguez, Sue Cates, seconds. Thank you. Could we have another round of applause? Now to the part we have service awards. The greatest strength of our either made conservation their career or have served on the board of directors providing leadership and direction. At the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority, we have been very fortunate to have so many of these people with us for so many years. Whether it's a board member, full-time or part-time employee, their dedication to our region is truly appreciated. Would Lori please help me present this year's service awards?
Absolutely.
Okay. For 5 years of service, joining virtually is John Brennan. He's the director from Municipality of Strathroy, Caradine.
Pat Brown, Director of the Township of St. Clair, for 5 years of service.
Oh, I can do this officially and look cool.
Okay.
Pat, are you gonna say a few words?
Thank you very much for all the support and directors and to our staff for leadership. Thank you. Frank Kennis, for 5 years of service, he's away and unable to attend today. Don McCallum, he's the director from the municipality of Southwest Middlesex in the village of Newberry. For 5 years, also, we have Lori Scott, who's director from the municipality of Lambton Shores.
Thank you.
And also for 5 years of service, Brad Loosely, who's the director from the town of Detroit.
Thank you, Chairman Pat. Again, I want to thank the board of directors. I want to thank all the staff and wish you all the very best in your future endeavors. I've enjoyed the 5 years and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Okay, for 10 years of service, one of our staff, Melissa Delsey, Director of Planning and Regulations. Also a member of our staff for 15 years of service, Steve Clark, Risk Management Official and Inspector. We're at the 20 years of service. Shane White, who's our maintenance foreman at the McHugh floodway. We're moving on to 25 years of service. Chris Duran, manager of GIS IT. And finally, for 35 years of service, Steve Shaw, manager of conservation services. Okay, I'll ask for a mover that the board of directors Directors acknowledges the service awards presented to the directors and staff, and further that they be thanked for their years of dedicated service. Eddie Ann? Thank you very much. Okay, well, that concludes our 2023 business, and we're going to take a short break here. So there's coffee and beverages there in the hallway. So we'll break for 10 minutes. Okay, thank you very much. We'll call the meeting to order and start our 2024 business. Mover, please, for the motion that the Board of Directors acknowledges and complies with St. Clair Region Conservation Authority's Code of Conduct and Administrative Bylaws. And I believe that document is in your package, or you've all got it to sign, and please turn into Ashley.
Don't be like me and leave it till Ashley is chasing you for the flag.
You know, I want to say greetings and welcome to Ross O'Hare. He's the new director that's going to be replacing Brad Goosley, who's with us, and welcome back, Ross.
Thank you.
So did I get a mover, please? Mary Ellen McCallum and Terry Burr, please, for second. For the next item is going to be the election of officers that I move for Ken Phillips be appointed the chair for the election of the 2024 chair and vice chair. Moved by Lori Scott, seconded by Emery Zinka. Any opposed? I take that as being carried. Thank you. So, Chairman Ken.
Thank you, Pat. I do declare that the position of chair and vice chair are now vacant. So the elections are completed. Just as I would like to ask for a motion that Chris Durant and Donna Blue be appointed as scrutineers in the event of an election. Okay, sorry, instead of Chris, okay, pardon me, Tim Payne and Donna Blue. Steve Miller first, seconded by Jerry Westgate. All in favor? Thank you. Just a quick protocols here. I will call for nominations. The nominations only need a mover. Need a seconder. I will call for 3 times for nominations. Where there are more than 2 candidates, no candidate receives a majority of the votes cast. A further vote will be held, for which the candidate receiving the least number of votes from the previous vote will be eliminated from the slate of candidates. The process will be repeated until one candidate has received a majority of votes cast. Where there are only 2 candidates, or only 2 candidates remaining, and each receives the same number of votes, another vote will be conducted. If a clear winner is determined, that candidate shall serve as chair for the coming year, or vice chair. Should no clear winner be made, the process outlined will be used, the same process will be used. The name of each candidate will be placed on a separate ballot, and the director will draw 1 ballot. The candidate will choose the ballot drawn, and that individual will be chair for the coming year. So with that, I would ask, are there any nominations for chair? Steve Miller. Thank you. Calling for a second time, are there any nominations for the position of chair? Calling for a second or third time and final time, are there any other nominations for the position of chair? Seeing none, I will ask Mr. Brown if he will allow himself to stand for the position of chair.
I will.
Okay. And with that, chair, St. Clair Conservation Authority for the year 2024. Congratulations. Would you like to say a few words?
Well, thank you for your support, and 2024, we all know what climate change is doing to the country and around the world, so I think puts more onus on what Conservation Authority is all about. And hopefully we can put our programs and support behind that type of action in the future. Thank you.
I will now ask for nominations for the position of vice chair. Cameron Hetzka.
Lori Scott's been, so Lori Scott.
Thank you. Second time, are there any nominations for the position of vice chair? Third and final time, are there any nominations for the position of vice chair? Seeing none, Lori, would you allow your name to stand for the position of vice chair?
Absolutely, it'd be a pleasure to work with you again.
Thank you. Just like to say a few words. So I will declare Lori Scott acclaimed as vice chair for the 2024 St. Clair Conservation.
Thank you. The last year has been an amazing experience. It's always neat to learn things about other municipalities that are involved in the same work that you are. Working with the staff is amazing. It's, you have people that know what they're talking about and know where they're going. And that only comes with the leadership of someone like Ken. And I think that's, he needs a round of applause because he's out of this world for being supportive and kind and making sure his staff and his board are looked after.
So with that, I request a mover and a seconder to close nominations and the elections. 2024, Terry Burrow and Ray Grimes. All in favor? Thank you. I'll turn things back over to Chair Brown.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, the next item on our 2024 business then is 13.1. That the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority adopts the 2023 nominating committee's report fulfilling the SCRCA committee needs in 2024. And Betty Ann, will you please report on that?
Thank you. Due to the chair and the vice chair being on two of the committees, we will need a person on the low water response committee, which was comprised of Terry Burrow, Frank Kennis, Pat Brown, Don McKay, and Lori. So now Pat had placed his name there just to fill the slate of officers when we were going through the nominations. So I'll need a person on the low water response committee, which I understand doesn't meet a whole lot. Any volunteers or nominations? Okay. Anyone else? Greg's stepping forward as a volunteer, so we should at least give him a round of applause. So that takes care of the low response. And now we need a replacement for Lori on the executive committee. So who would like to volunteer there? It doesn't meet very often. It's just a call of the chair. Yeah.
Like to volunteer Al Broad. Where are you? Oh, good, good.
And that's how we got the
Would you like to volunteer? Christine is volunteering, so that now fills the executive committee. So it now, I will accept a motion to accept the nominating committee as amended. Moved by Steve, seconded by Lori. All those in favor? Aye, the motion's carried. Oh, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that all other committees didn't need a change, so they should be accepted as given it.
There There is one other, right?
There's just-
The planning and the procedures, you know?
Sunset committees. So
Oh.
understand.
Okay. I guess we're good. Okay, 13, sorry. $13.2. The 2024 Executive Committee, the St. Clair region, is that mine for chair as the?
Yep.
Yeah, so it'll be myself as chair and Lori as vice chair. And then the other members of the executive committee are Al Rod, Rhonda Jubenville, Betty Ann Scott, Terry Burrow.
And Betty Ann McKinnon. It says Betty Ann McKinnon, yeah.
Oh, Betty Ann McKinnon, sorry.
It's giving them 2 extra names. Yeah.
Yeah, Terry Burrow, Frank Kennis, Steve Miller, and welcome to Rhonda Jubenville. Kristen. Sorry, I'm getting the ladies mixed up here.
That's right. It's all good.
So could I have a mover for the executive committee, please? Terry Burrow and Sue Cates. Seconds. All in favor? Okay, item 14, that's carried. That the authority chair and vice chair and general manager, secretary, treasurer, or director of finance be authorized to borrow from the Libro Credit Union, Strathroy, for the general operations and capital program of the authority, a sum not to exceed $1,810,000 to be repaid from grants received from the province of Ontario government of Canada and levies assessed to the member municipalities and general revenue. Mover, please. Terry Burrow. Seconded by Ross O'Hare. Any opposed? I'll take that as carried. Item 15.1, that the authority's 2024 representative to the Conservation Ontario will be the authority chair, the vice chair will be the first alternate, and the general manager will be the second alternate. Mover, please. Adam Kilner, seconded by John Brennan. Got you guys virtually. Any opposed? Seeing none, I'll take that as being carried. Okay, well, we have a guest presentation today, and I'm going to introduce her. And her name is Catherine Febvre. She is the research chair and assistant professor and director of Healthy Headwaters Lab at Great Lakes Institute for Environment Research at the University of Windsor on the relationship and collaboration with the St. Clair Region Conservation Biology Department. Dr. Febvre? Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for this invitation. I'll speak for my slides. Hopefully you can hear me. You might not be able to see me.
I think the switch on that microphone is off right now, Catherine. Just switch it on the side. No, it's on right on the side.
Oh. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. Probably can't see me from behind this photo, but I will stand on my tippy toes and hopefully this will go okay. And I'm just waiting for my slideshow. Yeah. Okay. Should I try this? Hopefully this will work as well.
Yeah, just wait for the screen to come up there. It's taking its time, of course.
I'm happy to get started. So, Ani Buju, Catherine Cabrera, Dishtakas, Philippines, and Dunjaba. Magandang umaga. My name is Catherine. I just greeted you both in Ojibwe and Tagalog, Tagalog, which is my first language. And just with gratitude of being here, I'm happy to share with you some of the work that has been underway for just under 5 years now in partnership with the St. Clair Conservation Authority under the banner of the Healthy Headwaters Lab. These are my places. I sit and work obviously here in Turtle Island in the heart of the Great Lakes. And I'm trained as a scientist, but a lot of the journey that I'm talking to you about is obviously rooted in the places where I come from, islands that are now called the Philippines, and time that I spent in the 2010s in Aotearoa, New Zealand with farming communities doing research on stream restoration. These are this is a little bit, yeah, a little jumpy, nervous. These are the homies. We always talk about how the Great Lakes, here in Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior, as they're known now, are the homes, and these are the homies. And so extending this invitation to me really does recognize a lot of labor from students and staff and their families and communities that support them to work under the banner of the Healthy Headwaters Lab. This is our annual Homie Day celebration where we had a bird-themed sort of end-of-term recognition of everyone's hard work. And so our group has really emerged from a lot about how we do science and how it's rooted in community. And so Healthy Headwaters Lab is our banner. Obviously, we want to use science to connect land, water, and people. We always think about how we value and connect and relate to water, and how we can use science as a tool for good and for peace and restoration. And how we really need to work with different ways of knowing and relationships with land and communities. And so in doing this work, we have a lot of conversations about what is excellence and impact and what is the science and how do we actually do work with and for community. And these are our communities of biological systems we work with, agricultural drains, which are far and common, and these are the places where there's rich life and diversity and function for all of our places. We also work with urbanized streams, so rivers that have been culverted or buried or bulldozed, individual tile drains as well. And we work across wetlands and drains and really get to know the biodiversity ecosystem functioning of these places. We support a number of individual student projects who really, and people who have a rich connection to the Great Lakes and to these watersheds. And it's a real privilege. I'll be showing you a lot of their names and spaces to really recognize how much work they put into this work. But our science toolbox involves a lot of things that include looking and measuring the physical structure of our drains, waterways, and wetlands, everything from the vegetation, speed of the water, what's in it, how fast it's flowing, when and why, and how it's related to rain events or drought events. We look at the critters that we often don't see but make up our drains and stream beds, so the benthic and vertebrate communities that are sitting within the rocks and sediment. Most of our lab is situated with federally certified water quality analyzers that are, repeat the same protocols as many of our commercial labs. So we're set up to measure water chemistry in situ, but also a series of analyzers in the lab that people and communities can use our lab services should they need them. So nitrogen, phosphorus, and carbon, the three main building blocks of all life, are the kinds of constituents we measure in its dissolved form as it runs off from the farm field, as well as in its more carbon-centric like plant and animal forms. And we obviously also include biodiversity in the margins at the water and land interface. And in doing sort of plant-based surveys, working with a lot of farming communities and expert holders to identify those plant beings, we're also investigating different ways of stewarding and assessing stewardship through things like drone and GIS technologies. So as a science provider, we often think about what we do. So we publish a lot of our work in the peer-reviewed literature. We synthesize knowledge from technical reports and local community experts, and we publish them to make sure that the work that we're doing is legitimized and recognized and useful for other communities around the world who want to understand how to work in suburban landscapes, how to work in agricultural drain networks, what we should measure, and whether or not things are working. And this really kind of connects a lot of the work we do in place all the way up to national and UN levels. But the things we get really excited about are our plain language communication tools. So you can find technical reports, more than 50, that are written for everybody through and distributed through things like Facebook and download pages. We've been tracking just what is more useful, and more than any of the papers we publish, it are these outputs that people are reading, and that's a good validation that our knowledge users are requesting and needing a lot of this information. We also have a social media relationship, like meeting people and individuals, whether they be urban residents or farmers, where they're at. So there's a very intentional social media team, a communications team rooted in storytelling, wanting to talk about the science that we're doing, who is doing it, and the methods that we've been using to really connect people and science, land, and water. And this is just one constellation of the kinds of partners that over the last few years we've been working with. Scientists, managers, funding agencies, local communities, First Nation communities that we work in partnership with to try and bridge what science is needed for a specific decision-making context. And doing these and fostering these networks, I really work to try and show the next generation as much of what we're learning through this process. So there are people in our group today all the way at the back who are training in this space and wanting to learn and connect with you all. So a lot of what drives the science and our theory of change is this idea, or the impetus of it being the decade of ecosystem restoration. And one of the largest calls globally is to try and curb erosion from landscapes into waterways and coastal environments. So really thinking about that, I really wanted to maximize our efforts to try and address this locally. And all of it is really centered with partnerships, and one of our biggest partners is you. I'll just wait for our slide to change. And the science is very clear that, you know, we can think about, do we need more science to achieve restoration? If you think about this wheel, I'm just gonna say, is it the ecological integrity of the system that will guarantee restoration success? Is it scientific approaches that look backwards and forwards to predict ecological recovery? Or is it the efforts that involve and engage society? And when we look around the world, it's really when they're benefiting and engaging our communities are maximized, that's when the efforts to achieve restoration and conservation are sustained. So in our group, the way that we've done it is we have both a farm advisory board and research network called the FAB, or the FERN, as well as Odaming, which is an Indigenous knowledge circle, and they're members that kind of come back and forth. And for the last 5 years, we have journeyed together, creating spaces for farming communities to talk to a freshwater ecology lab, and likewise create spaces for Indigenous-led science and science practitioners. And we meet regularly, separately, together. And in this work, we can generate a process of science co-production. In just a few weeks, we're having our farm advisory board night. Everyone is invited to it. It is when we share a lot of our research in plain language, so the students will present as well as our partners. It's a hybrid event. If you come in person, there will be some local food, and I think well worth it to connect in person. But likewise, it's an opportunity for us to extend our gratitude to a lot of farming community members across the region who have really opened their farm gates to our research teams, as well as to researchers who are wanting to work together in a good way. Just give you a minute, I see people are taking a photo, and this slide's coming back at the end, so you can take another photo. All right, so with our Indigenous Knowledge Circle, Odaming, it has taken its own direction. It has included land-based teaching, and the first university land-based course at the University of Windsor with our partners at Walpole Island First Nation. It has fostered Indigenous storytelling, as well as a coloring book copy that I brought today of Mariah Alexander, who's from this community, both from Walpole as well as the North Buxton community, and is a featured artist at the Wallaceburg Health Unit, as well as in the Chatham Museum, and has allowed us to not only host meetings, but also be invited into community. So these different things happen as well as our science, and are seen as being very important parts of how we relate and know what role we can play as a science provider. I'm just gonna wait for the slide to catch up. This is what we talk about as our science co-production process. It's a very circular relational system where we talk about and enhance the diverse ways of knowing. How do we connect with water and land and soil and plants and animals? How do we actually invest in the relationships first, so that from that we can actually listen for what are the science questions. You know, what are the BMPs that are being implemented? Maybe you've tried something already and it's working or not. Let's understand why and understand how it can be scaled to other places in this watershed or to other ones. And so we co-create research intentionally, we identify what the study design would look like, and then we actually talk about how are we gonna communicate this. So we've had a number of different processes that have emerged in a number of different projects. So I'll just take you to Aotearoa, New Zealand for a little minute, just to talk about where this work route started. I know nothing about dairy farming and spent the 2010s working in partnership with farmers as a stream restoration person. On the surface, it seems like it's not the same place. You might think of like beautiful mountains and hobbits and happy cows, but ultimately it's the same context where we have a lot of landscape that over the last 150 years has been converted and flattened, tiled, and farmed for various agricultural purposes. Sorry, this, so anyway, this could be anywhere in the Great Lakes, but an agricultural landscape that's very flat, clay dominated, might require a network of tile drains, at the same time waterway systems that are home to aquatic species at risk, fisheries, and eutrophication problems downstream. So it is very similar despite being on opposite center places on the planet. I worked for 5 years with farming communities to co-create things like under the banner of Carex. It's a genus, a native species that we were able to plant and test along with other solutions with farmers. We've spent a lot of time as part of our team talking to individual farmers about what solutions they could bring, government agencies, governments, industry partners who are funding and supporting this work, and then bringing the community to help implement and test our experiment. We talked about it as a toolbox of solutions that farmers could use and implement, and then we as science providers measured the outcome. So a waterway that looked, I'm sorry, hopefully you don't get whiplash, but a waterway that looked a lot like this, overgrown by invasive weeds. The weeds of issue in New Zealand are actually from Canada, so pondweed and other species that often, and Potamopergus snails. They were creating drainage blockage problems for farmers. So fees that were paid every year were getting bigger and bigger and flooding farm fields. So it was no longer a reasonable, practical solution. They wanted something else that required less intervention, as well as having nutrient problems, E. coli problems, because it's dairy farming. And we really created a series of like 9 different 1-kilometer reaches across the region to implement planting solutions. So we found some native plants that farmers could write grants around, planted them to outcompete native weeds, having Te Ara Papariki, the local community school group, to replant them, and then we monitored them over 5 years. Within 2 years' time, we were able to find that the plants were out competing in the weeds, providing shade, stabilizing the banks, and we were able to find that the diversity of native plants were providing enough food source for the invertebrates and fish that occupy these drains. What this showed was that partnerships are the thing that's partnerships are the things that overcome a lot of the barriers. And it was through this, we extended planting on a wetland. A local community expanded this approach to an additional 4 kilometers in another watershed. And it was through shared walks and talks and community events with Manawhenua, our tribal partners, and farmers, that there was a real deepening of understanding of how sacred these wetlands were as cultural places, burial sites, and ceremony. It also leveraged a lot of our actual science funding. So it was a really great example of how, it wasn't the science that drove and scaled a lot of the solutions. It was really a community approach. So what we've learned is that the restoration, when we talk about freshwater restoration, is much about relationships as it is about the species that we're thinking about or the actions that we're taking. And a lot of the work I spend with the young people in the next generation is thinking about how we can bridge and work together. And there's a lot of other kind of science. So we published on this, like this thing, idea of resilience, and how can we build up connections. Right now our food webs are very simplified by invertebrates and worms and snails, and not necessarily species that are more sensitive. How can we actually create connections? And that restoration and conservation should hopefully promote positive resilience mechanisms so that we're not always having to manage those relationships. They can be self-sustaining. So we think a lot about that theory. That's the theory of change for a lot of our science work, is how do we connect, unionid mussels with the benthics and with the fish and with land and stewardship. And so the mussels are really the kind of key flagship species for a lot of the work we do. And as many of you know, this watershed is a really important place for freshwater mussel biodiversity, one of the rarest watersheds, most biodiverse watersheds in all of Canada. And it's a privilege to really think about what is it that a mussel requires, and really think about how we can use all of our different ways. So a mussel, as you know, its genetic material is released into the riverbeds. They require a fish host that travels up and down the waterways until the point where they can release their babies into the rivers. And so we've been really privileged to receive a grant from Fisheries and Oceans Canada that we've worked in partnership with this conservation authority to help understand the distribution. Most of the sampling that had been happening was either through the Conservation Authority or DFO, and we were able to knit together new sites for monitoring, but it was almost all entirely in partnership with the biology team here, with DFO, as well as trainees from places like the Ketchikan. So we did this through the pandemic. I mean, half of our life as a lab has been under a pandemic, but multiple students were able to help develop relationships quantitatively around what is the link between an invertebrate species and its habitat. We've been able to investigate relationships between the North Branch and the East Branch, understanding fundamentally and geologically they are different, so they support different communities. And we've been able to really think about small streams and their connection to the larger main stems. And hopefully, again, enriching our knowledge of why do we find the species where they are, how can we use the information around who they relate to in terms of other species and their environment to help advance restoration and conservation in the region. So the work that we've been doing here, and again, I'll just wait, has been completely as a team. It's ideally a nice COVID environment. You have to be like 6 feet away from each other. So we started doing a lot of the field work in these riverways, and so many landowners and people we've met along the way have been really generous to our team, and it's really been a great place for students to begin as terms of learners. How do we work in partnerships? It's especially time intensive when we're looking at the rivers. We try not to take anything, leave really ripples and boot prints. And so we've been also trying to listen to how we can be useful. So we've been looking at iNaturalist, host fish data sets, bringing together resources for people in this community to be able to, make decisions. And so that's one of the examples. Julia was one of our students who looked at gathering all the fish data, for example, together in concert with the mussel data. Also in this watershed is a real examination into whether or not the mitigation protocols are working. So we do a lot of translocation around mussels, and our PhD student, Lauren, has found that when we've revisited a lot of the sites, not only in the Sydenham River, but in the Grand River as well, the protocol that's being used has never actually been evaluated in terms of its effectiveness. So for 15 years, there have been movements of animals, and we've been able to revisit a lot of the infrastructure sites, looking to see if the mussels ever return, whether or not where they were relocated to was successful. And to make a longer story short, even after 15 years of this practice, we're finding very low recovery. But to answer this and simply say it's not working, also here in this watershed, Lauren has been able to work in partnership with not only our Indigenous stewards and St. Clair Conservation Authority and DFO to look at these reports. Sorry, I'm just going to skip the results here, but it's very low. You can see it's going down like over your time of translocation. We're really not finding species at risk. So we recreated an experiment to try and understand why is it not working. When we've recreated, like preliminary evidence shows that if we do this with care, actually the recovery is quite higher. And so can we make recommendations to policy and practice to make sure that this translocation protocol is as effective as it can be? So I did bring SCRCA and Thurania here. They're looking at stewardship, thinking about the stewardship tools that are in place around the watershed. Is it working, and can we use other tools that are less, resource intensive, like drones, to assess the effectiveness of that kind of land-based stewardship? And Thurania is literally just looking at the sediment relationships between mussel habitats where stewardship has happened to try and explain if there are some relationships of when it's working and how can we make stewardship effective. Or more effective. If it's working really well, why does it work well? And if there are improvements that can be made, what could they be? And then SCRCA, I'm going to wait for your slide. I'm just not going to press it too many times in case it needs a minute. Can you press the next slide, please? So she's worked with Ontario Nature on the East Branch to really look at transects of replanting to see if there are other ways, especially spatial images of, if we look from the top, can we actually do a good assessment of of vegetation, if it's recovering, if what is planted and is what is stewarded matching what that plan was, and if there are ways that we can use these different ways for monitoring stewardship. Next slide, please. Yes, she's also provided a synthesis of stewardship reports as part of her thesis, and we're hoping that this is information that can be useful to, again, for decision makers or people to decide where priority conservation efforts can be focused. Next slide, please. So I'm hoping that the last thing I wanted to talk about is what we're hoping to develop and what we've been publishing on recently is other ways of looking at ecosystem health as a restoration indicator. We call it watershed T. Next slide, please. You can imagine whatever is happening on the watershed comes out of our rivers, and we have a tool called fluorescence to measure the imprint of human impacts on our waterways. It incorporates urban land use, agricultural land use, conservation and stewardship. Next slide, please. And we can basically generate rainbow topographic maps. So so instead of doing a lot of that labor-intensive research, we can actually look at water quality through this fluorometry lens. Next slide. And we've been able to work with our farming communities to show that actually conservation practices, whether it be tillage or other types of BMPs, our fluorescence-based approach is sensitive enough to detect differences in the organic matter that's leaving farm fields and entering into our streams. Likewise, it's able to tell us the difference between urban and agricultural land use. So ultimately, this is hopefully another indicator that we can offer to try and assess the health as well as the recovery of our ecosystems. Next slide, please. This is a broader gradient. This is Cheyenne's PhD. We work not only in the Sydenham, but we work really across the region to try and understand the ecosystem health status. It's mapped very closely to the watershed report card, and it's almost a better predictor than many of the other indicators that we've been using. Next slide. And I just wanted to end by simply saying we couldn't do this research without partnerships. The ability to do and develop these scientific approaches has started and is rooted by science. Next slide. These are all of these different papers and people that have been able to publish, complete their thesis, or scientific literature from research that has happened here in this watershed. It's very humbling to be able to present to you because we've been wanting to, share what we've learned with the broader scientific community, but obviously coming here has been a really wonderful way for us to express our gratitude. These papers are all from our land-based ecological knowledge class to the drain network synthesis, which we worked with OMAFRA and the St. Clair region and other conservation authorities to evaluating data sets that already exist. These are all stories that are shining a light on how partnerships in this community have been really driving and really promoting science in Canada and beyond. Next slide, please. I wanted to just talk about also how our outreach and relationships, St. Clair has been a great partner in helping us train the next generation. And it's been wonderful to bring the eco-keepers, high school age kind of young professionals identifying environmental research careers as a pathway. And for the last 4 years, we've been muscling together, looking into drains together, looking at water quality and training, and actually one of the youth is actually now one of our staff. So that's been wonderful to see the young people grow, and we wanted to extend our gratitude to this community. Next slide. So here it is again, if you want to come to the Farm Advisory Board meeting, we'll be talking really more about farm field operations, questions around what has been working and what has been working in that Farm Advisory Board network for other farmers to share and connect their learning. And we really do hope that it can be a networking event for this community. We are thinking about expanding our Farm Advisory Board network as far as we can, especially into this watershed. So if there's interest, we'd be really open to building a relationship with you all individually as well as collectively. Next slide, please. We also have started an endowment fund, which will help create a pathway for Indigenous environmental monitors to pursue conference and training and other, as we decide and determine, which may involve school, maybe plant-based teaching and learning. And so we're really pleased to share this with the world as well. And I think that's it. I just wanted to again say thank you. Happy to take any questions. And I can't say thank you enough. And thanks for the invitation. English.
Thank you, Catherine. And thank you, Catherine, for your presentation and an overview of all the research that your team does in our area and the benefits. Or you have a question, any other questions? We'll follow up here.
I was just wondering if you had that beautiful symbol, with the hands and the strawberry. Have you thought of using that and having that made into jewelry as a fundraiser?
We have actually, like, one of the youth does beadwork for us, so we haven't used it as a fundraiser. I usually like gift them to people, and we have used it in some of our promotional materials, but we could.
So that's an idea for a fundraiser. The other thing was you had a number of paintings and things in your coloring book and that.
Yes.
Getting those made into prints and again, selling those would probably go over well. And the coloring books you could probably sell as well.
Yes, I have copies here. We actually, it's a nonprofit kind of enterprise. We self-published it. You can download the pages from, we have a publications page. And we've decided to really make them available to as many communities as possible. And we really just it could be a fundraiser, you're right, but more than anything, we've actually created a donation page to the artists because it really came from a place of wanting to reconnect with place and language. And so that was their choice to make it, you can make a donation to the fund, you can make a donation to the artist, you can also just order. University of Windsor's print shop has the file, the book on file, and they will mail it directly to any community anywhere.
That's cool. So my other question was, what can the average person do to contribute? It's great to have the science.
Yes.
And I'm really glad that there are teams of people out there.
Yes.
But what can I, as a person who lives by a waterway, do as my share, my own personal share, that I can say to 5 different friends, hey, we're gonna go out and do this afternoon?
Yeah, well, I think the Conservation Authority has lots of different programs. We have individual, that's why our social media platform is about connecting with individual people. So as prompts for, where's your water and, what is it connected to, understanding the relationship. So I think any returning back to land and waterways, even if they are wetlands and drains, what we're hoping to show through our storytelling is that there is life there. What we learned in New Zealand is that there are plants along the riparian buffers that can provide co-benefits. So I think, again, sharing the story, if you are able to share any of the public resources, we have tip sheets, public newsletters. Our newsletter is just about to launch for this year. Sharing that as much as possible. We have been tracking exactly how many times it gets downloaded, where in the world it goes. There's a reason why, farmers told us that they were on Twitter or Facebook, and communities told us where exactly they needed that information. So I think if you're accessing any of the information, just know that we as a science team are actually really looking at that information to validate that we are meeting people where they're at. But again, bringing communities together, I think anything that, our focus is on the next generation, really connecting relationships and creating spaces for different communities in the same watershed to gather around water. I think there's a toolbox. I think if any of these things happen, I lay out things as constellations, how you want to knit them together is really up to the individual. And I think that was the intention with us as a science group, is to provide options. And for whoever needs to make a decision or who wants to make those connections, this is how our sciences can be helpful.
So there are a lot of cottage associations around that are on waterway or close to waterway, close to drains. There's farm associations and different items like that that are in place already. So have you talked to Cottage Life? I think it's SCRCA,
No, that's one community we haven't been invited into. A lot of times, not yet. I think we've been very intentional about, but if there was an invitation, we would certainly welcome it. We would make the same offering. These are the science skills we provide, and what is useful now or in the future, or how can we bridge, through partnership.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you again, Catherine, for your presentation. This time I'm going to look for a mover and seconder that the Board of Directors receive the information presentation provided by Dr. Catherine Vibra, Canada Research Chair, Assistant Professor and Director of the Healthy Headwaters Lab at the Great Lakes Institute for Environment Research at the University of Windsor on the relationship and collaboration with St. Clair Region Conservation Authority Biology Department. Mover, please. Okay, and seconded by Kristen, agrees.
And if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I have one more question for the presenter.
Oh, okay, Don?
The, question that I have is with regards to the thesis work that's ongoing. Theses are, seem a heck of a lot longer than 3 years or whatever to achieve a degree when you're a student. But we're dealing with a dynamic system here, and climate change is now having a tremendous impact, and I note the lack of results in trying to repopulate areas with certain species. And how do you differentiate with the impacts of climate change and impacts of land use change on the landscape in such a small window of opportunity for the work that's being done here in research? Because online, you have a deep enough historical database to pull together the data to draw meaningful conclusions?
Yes, thank you for that question. I didn't go into the technical details, but in the paper that we published on freshwater invertebrates and unionids, we actually combined our 2-year survey with further 15 years worth of data, combined DFO, Fisheries and Ocean Canada, and St. Clair region to really strengthen the statistical finding that where you find species at risk, you also find other benthic invertebrates. So that's another example of partnership. We actually were able to have a memorandum of understanding between the different organizations to combine the data. So we expanded our own 15-point data set with a further 97. So again, this is why there is a lot of knowledge and data already out there. So we were able to do that. The other approach we use is called space for time. There are a number of translocations outside of this watershed. So we've been able to revisit sites that expand a broader time gradient. And when it comes to climate change, we can expand our time series based on what does a 1-year survey look like. Well, we very intentionally chose translocation sites that were 1 year old, 6 years old, but all within the same watershed. And that's one approach that we use in the face of climate change. The theses that have been produced are actually on the website right away. So as soon as a student publishes it, it's available. And the reason why we do the newsletter is to actually mobilize that information in plain language. So if you go to our lab website, there's blogs, as well as a publication site to try and again, mobilize that information. That's also why we openly and very gratefully accept any sort of invitation to speak about the science, because, you know, as the decision makers, we really want to make sure you have the most readily available science. But you can always just reach out if there's something that you see here. If it's a work in progress, we are very intentional about explaining why something might be uncertain, because it might be uncertain just because there's too much variability. It might be uncertain because we haven't measured it. We're very intentional about explaining why, so that you can, as a decision maker, move forward. And hopefully, in this case of the drain superintendent project, figure out if there's a trial that we can co-create together. So that's kind of the kinds of ways that we can help, I guess, just align and accelerate decision-making and the role of science. Thanks.
Okay, well, thanks again, Catherine. And so I had that moved and seconded. Any opposed to that motion? 16.1. I want to keep moving here. Item 17.1, the Board of Directors acknowledges the General Manager's report dated February 12th. Ken, do you have anything further there? Mover Terry Burrow, and seconded by Steve Miller. Any opposed? Seeing none, I'll take that as being carried. 17.1. A mover, please, that the Board of Directors approves the SCRCA land acquisition and disposition policy as identified through the recent changes to the mandatory programs and services regulation under the Conservation Authorities Act. Mover, Terry Brennan. John Brennan, yes, sorry. Mary Lynn McCallum, seconds. Any comments, Don? Go ahead.
With regards to this report, I appreciate it's very bare bones and, very operational and it's, the way it's laid out. But, it's been alluded to at this, meeting today, the issue of being able to establish priorities in light of, the recognition of climate change impacts on our region, whether real or imagined. And, the thing that I found lacking, since it's an internal document, for, our use, in the, area, is really a priority setting of, what, there's always gonna be limited funds, and it's hard to predict where the funds may come from, or where lands may be donated from. But is there a fairy tale estimation by the staff who compiled this report of what land they would characterize an attempt to acquire or advertise for in the region?
Kevin, do you want to make a comment on that?
Three of the shots as well.
So when we looked at developing this, we wanted to get something in place that would be functional right away. In our strategy, we had left an opening where we could, through a GIS process, set priorities on land to acquire and do a ranking system and go through the whole watershed and develop priorities. We haven't done that at this stage based on, we generally don't have much funding to acquire. So what we've looked at is when opportunities arise, whether it's donation, whether it's an opportunity for some sort of purchase, we would look first at putting a fact sheet together, bringing that information to the board. It has some criteria that sets priority of what sort of features on the land we prioritize. And then from that, the board would have the decision, the final decision on any acquisition. But we would be looking at in the future, if we find a funding source to do that exercise and identify lands of priority, we would like to proceed with that as well in the future.
Thank you. I just, and you're already well aware of this, I'm sure. Timelines when it comes to real estate acquisitions are usually extremely short time frame, and any free work that can be done to establish those priorities is vital, I think, to making a successful transaction.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, we're just.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Anybody else on this item? All right, go ahead.
I think we should take a serious look at prioritizing. I think Don has a very good thing in wanting to move forward. It's great to develop a strategic area, and as Greg said, it was needed to be done so that we had it in place. But I think we need to look at that more, because when we have people, there's a certain age group of people right now that are getting older, and a lot of them have some valuable land that they may not know what to do with, that may be exactly the type of things we're looking at. And if we have a list of, at least not so much maybe where the property has to come from, but a list of what it is we think we require, like maybe missing pieces of things that we need, we should be having that as a strategic plan, I think, to sit down and talk about that, because if we don't know what we need, we don't know when the opportunity comes up. And if the opportunity is a 2-week thing to, with that land, and hold it for 2 weeks, then we have to have emergency meetings. But if we've already done the homework and we're being in front of it, then we don't have to rush and do it. So if we have an idea of all these things in place at first, then we would know what we want. And then it would be easier to identify if something comes up. Greg could come back and say, I have a farm here that has 10 acres of woodland that has exactly the missing components that we want. We should take a look at it. And we might find, by talking to the farmer, for example, if it's not going to be any good to put grain or wheat or anything on it that is valuable to the farmer, that he may leave it in a will to us. And if we don't know that, then we'll never get the land.
Okay, I think that's part of the reason that this policy's come from staff, so I'll leave it at that for now, and we've had that moved and seconded already. A little discussion on it. 17.3. That the Board of Directors acknowledges the report highlighting the development of land inventory as required through the recent changes to the mandatory programs and services regulation under the Conservation Authorities Act. Mover, please. Greg Grimes, and seconded by Terry Burrow. Questions or comments? Don McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment that has been brought to my attention by a farmer in the municipality of Sarnia, that due to the non-recognition of Perch Creek, and make sure I say this properly, Perch Creek is not necessarily a tributary to the Sydenham River, and the definition of the watershed that is on page 67 or page 2 of the report is very detailed on the Sydenham River aspect, but Perch Creek does not necessarily is not pulled out within this definition of watershed and water. We have a certain bureaucracy in Toronto who can't figure out that water does run downhill and does go into Lake Huron, and that's part of the St. Clair watershed. So if we can just be a little bit more explicit and offer a geography lesson to certain people, it might alleviate some concerns of people who are looking for grants and other opportunities.
Okay, thank you. Is Tony here? Staff have any comments in that regard for Don's acknowledgement on the status of Birch Creek? Greg, go ahead.
So this report is highlighting that we have developed a land inventory. That's a mandatory component, has to be done by the end of the year. That's part of the changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. So this land inventory just highlights all land owned by the authority. We didn't include it in the report itself because it's a large spreadsheet. It's not suitable for this format. We have it available on the office, and it's available digitally for us to provide to the board if anybody was interested. But it's just, it's a large inventory of all property we own, and it's a mandatory component. As far as that Perch Creek being recognized as part of our watershed, it's within our boundaries. Our watershed includes the Sydenham River, north and east branches, as well as tributaries of Lake Huron and the St. Clair River and Lake St. Clair.
Okay, any opposed to motion 17.3? Seeing none, I'll take that as being carried on that acknowledgement. 17.4, that the Board of Directors acknowledges the draft conservation land strategy developed as part of the recent changes to the mandatory programs and services regulation under Conservation Authorities Act. Furthermore, the Board of Directors directs staff to proceed with public consultation and Indigenous engagement sessions at areas strategy. Lori Scott, second. Any questions, comments on 17.4? Seeing none, I'll take that item as being carried. Consent agenda, items 18.1A through 18.1K. Mover, please, that the Board of Directors approves the consent agenda and endorses the recommendation of accompanying items. 18.1A to 18.1K. Emery?
Mr. Chair, could we pull 18.1K out for the special, please?
Okay.
Otherwise, I'll do the rest.
Okay, that's, K is the 2024 special
Yeah.
events. Thank you. Okay, excluding item K, a mover, Emery. Seconded by Terry Burrow. Okay, any opposed? Seeing none, I'll take that as being carried, and let's jump to 18.1K for special. Go ahead, Emery. Let's one bring it up.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the only thing more lovely than this community center is a lovely canoe trip down the Sydenham River. And by coincidence, there happens to be a Sydenham River canoe and kayak race, which isn't really a race unless you're one of the real professionals. It's scheduled this year for Sunday, April 28th. And you know, it is the prettiest canoe trip you have ever taken in Southern Ontario. So I would strongly encourage you to talk to anybody here about coming to join us. There are recreational classes, and all monies that we raise for the Conservation Authority Foundation, which helps in the education programs for children, strongly suggest that we all take advantage of this beautiful opportunity. Tell your friends, tell your family, bring people you like, bring people you don't like, leave them there. Thank you.
Yeah, it's in the, well, Emery, thank you for that plug, and certainly it was unfortunate that we didn't get to race last year, but hopefully we'll get some canoeists out there and raise funds for that. Don McCallum, or Kate, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After that reading endorsement, I feel a necessity to make sure that everybody is energized for that canoe race. So I point out that there is a maple syrup festival occurring in Port Ellison on March 16th and 17th. Unfortunately, I have to raise one concern that I had to promise to some individuals who were not impressed with the idea that there would be the opportunity for liquor sales to be involved with that event at Campbell Park. They did not feel that they could assess a proper pairing for pancakes with the appropriate wine or beer. But it is the issue of just the reality of they did not feel that liquor license should be needed at a pancake festival. So I am doing my due diligence to fill that promise.
Okay, thank you for raising that. All right, I'm going to move on. Vote on 18.1K, please, for our special events.
Yes.
Go ahead. Oh, moved by Greg Ryan, seconded by Jerry Westgate. Any opposed? I'll take that as being carried. Okay, correspondence 19.1. The Board of Directors acknowledge the correspondence from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry dated December 13th, 2023, granting the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority an extension to March 31st, 2024 in order to meet the transition requirements under Ontario Regulation 687/21 transition plans and agreements under the CAA regulation. So, General Manager Ken, how are we doing in that regard of getting all of our municipalities signed or memorandums?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So to date, we have 13 of 17. Just waiting to get final signed copies back from most of them. And starting I'm still in discussion with, but I will be having further discussions with others as the year goes on. But just in terms of meeting the deadlines, we are going to meet the deadlines, I think.
Okay, thank you for that update. Could I get a mover for that motion, please? Sue Case, seconded by Terry Burrow. Any opposed? I'll take that as being carried. Thank you. 19.2. Mover, please, that the Board of Directors acknowledge the correspondence from the Ministry of Natural Resources dated December 13, extending the Minister's direction for conservation authorities regarding fee changes associated with planning, development, and permitting fees to December 31st of 2024. Mover, please. Steve Miller, and seconded by Lori Scott. Any opposed? Okay. We're going to have to ask our guests and other, go ahead.
Well, is there any way that we could have an agenda change here? I think we should eat first, allow our guests to eat, and then we could have that in-camera session after the lunch is served, and that's okay with the directors. I'll make that a motion to alter the agenda.
Okay, have that motion by Al Broad, seconded by Steve. Comments? Terry, you have a concern?
I would suggest finish the business. It's gonna take, I would say, 2 to 5 minutes at most. And to wait till hopefully everybody's back.
Okay, what's everybody's,
I make a motion that we can vote on.
yeah, we vote on that motion, opposed to that motion?
You have a question.
Oh, Adam, go ahead.
I just wonder, Mr. Chair, how that will work for those of us online who are not going to be able to eat lunch with you.
Okay, let's ask the question of the motion that we have on the floor. Those in favor of going for lunch, or as Al has indicated in his motion, that we break for lunch and then reconvene to go in camera. Those in favor? I'm going to declare that carried. So we're going to break for lunch and we'll reconvene. Oh, Adam, go ahead.
Oh, you might have already been going that direction, but could we who are online have a, can somebody indicate to us when we should return to our computers?
Yeah. I'm gonna guesstimate 1 o'clock this afternoon. Okay, you can make it back. John, go ahead. I see your hands up.
I'll be unable to attend the in-camera session if you're moving it to 1.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, I'm going to say we break now that lunch should be here, Ashley, and we'll move that we adjourn until